I am back from Warhammer World, back from my first competitive event, and boy howdy, do I have a lot to talk about. Welcome to War Games on Toast, all of you wonderful people. It's me, it's Toast, and if I sound a little bit different today, that's because things have changed. I am trying to work on my enunciation, my mumbling, and my slurring because it's pretty bad. It's been bad for a while, and my actual real-life job has decided to make me a voice actor, and that requires me to relearn how I speak. So if I sound different, or if I'm talking a little bit slower, that is why I am trying to relearn my speech patterns and all that jazz, and hopefully that does mean that's better content for you in the long run, but we will soon find out. Enough about all of that. Let's talk about Warhammer World, let's talk about Warcry, and let's talk about the Tangled Gnarlwood. But before we dive into all of that nitty-gritty, please consider leaving a like, a comment, and subscribing, as that helps me fight against that dastardly YouTube algorithmic demon. And if you want to help in a more tangible way, then please consider signing up to my Patreon or to my YouTube members like these amazing people on screen now. Doing so will grant you access to our monthly giveaways alongside some behind the scene content, among other cool things. A huge shout out to the recently anointed algorithmic demon slayers, Armoire Enthusiast 7, Dimitri de Gaius, Long Run Hobbies, and the Head Knight of Paint. And without further ado, let's get on with the show.
Groovy.
If you've been following my community updates, you will have seen that I attended the most recent Warcry event hosted by Games Workshop at Warhammer World. 26 players attended, and man, it was pretty darn awesome. I originally intended to do a vlog, take loads of pictures, and document the whole thing, but I got caught up in the event and the awesome people I met and interacted with throughout, and ultimately decided to scrap that idea for this, and hopefully it's not dreadfully pantsy. Now, I made the interesting decision to not bring Flame Seekers to the event. Life got in the way, and I simply didn't have the time to get the list built and painted, which is a real shame after 2 videos and 20-something games with them in the last month alone. Not being able to take them was heartbreaking. But that being said, I had a warband on hand that was almost ready to go, and that was the Cruel Boys. If the Flame Seekers are my current love, the Cruel Boys are the old reliable that I can always count on to pull through when the chips are down. And my list consisted of a Bolt Boy boss, 3 Gut Rippers, Talker Tough Skull, Shank, a Brute Boss with Boss Chopper, and a Gorger Clawback. If you saw any of my TTS battle reports using Cruel Boys, the core of this list is very similar to what I was dabbling with around about 2 months ago. With the release of the Gorger More Pack, I saw an opportunity to really fill in some gaps I found in the list and give it more damage and more threat projection. The Bolt Boy boss and the Clawback work as my projection. The Bolt Boy boss is a nightmare if left unattended, thanks to his 15-inch range and very potent crossbow. And yeah, sure, he requires constant ability dice to fully use, since aimed shot is the crux of his power. It also makes him very static, which can be an issue. The Clawback, another double hungry fellow, has an 11-inch threat range and a 16-inch total reach across the board. This makes him a wonderful nuke who I can deploy and just smash into things I need dead. He is very squishy with only 35 wounds, and that does sound like a lot, and that is because it is, but toughness 3 means he bleeds damage. Now, Talker and Shank add 2 2-inch 2+ nets to my list for utility, and Talker himself is very similar to a Gut Ripper boss, only he gains a net and loses out on 1 toughness, but he is also cheaper, making a fair trade overall. Here comes the issues though. Both the Bolt Boy boss and the Clawback want doubles. This adds loads of versatility, but it also adds a lot of resource strain, more than I think this list could really handle once everything was said and done, and was probably a result of me trying to put too much value and cram too many eggs into one basket. Shank is great. Talker is great. I am not entirely sure if both of these guys fit in this list after playing it at the event. Now, Gut Rippers are just excellent models. Wet noodles in combat, but great defensive stats, and Cunning Trap help them exert pressure and force your opponent to make tough decisions. They do what they do well, and yeah, they fill up the bulk of the list. And finally, the Brute Boss was another versatility pick, and one that I really enjoy in most lists due to the power of his stat block and access to charge, and access to Umessin to shut down objectives. He felt like he wasn't exactly suited to the list in a way that I wanted though. If I was to make this list again, I would maybe drop Shank for a Stab Grot and replace the Brute Boss for a Monster Killer Beast Knob for more movement and damage output in exchange for a reduction in utility. Utility that really wasn't needed all that much because of the missions. This was a 4-game event, and the missions were Hidden Vault, Cursed Prize, Brutal Conquest, and Leylines. Most of these missions were great. Hidden Vault, which I admittedly played wrong due to not playing it in a long while and being sleep deprived, is a fine mission. Brutal Conquest, despite my initial thoughts on it being a little bit jank, actually turned out to be a lot of fun, if poorly worded. And of course, Leylines is just a classic mission through and through. The real sour note here is Curse Prize, which is a single treasure mission that didn't resonate with anyone. There are 2 ways to play this one out. You either get bullied by a more elite warband and spend 4 turns chasing the relic, or you are dancing around waiting until turn 4 and desperately hoping you get initiative for that last second steal. The mission is just awful overall. There are a lot of weird interactions, the wording on the mission caused a lot of confusion, and the effects and abilities it brings to the table are nasty for both sides. Just having the treasure turns your guy into a walking nuke you can also heal, which I guess is great if you have it. If Games Workshop are listening, and I think they are, just maybe not to this video, they sent out a feedback form. They should cut this mission going forward. My opponent had a miserable time, and from the people I talked to, most people didn't have a good time here either. I won and I felt like an absolute cock. And I just played it straight. I got it turn 1 and then ran away. He couldn't catch me, and that was game. Boom. It was an awful way to head into the lunchtime break. Overall though, the pack was fine and really pushed towards brutal combat and elite warbands, or warbands that could just hold their own in combat. This means that some factions who typically do well, such as the usually S-tier Soul-Blight Gravelords, tended to struggle, and we will see what that means for the event later on. When looking at the factions in attendance, it really paints a picture in terms of what the UK meta could look like. Warcry is not Games Workshop's most popular game. However, the competitive scene is growing as multiple events hosted by Games Workshop have been successful as of late. While one event in a sea of smaller events is not concrete evidence to go by, the faction turnout is very interesting and could hint at the UK meta being in its infancy and still finding its balance, or that the UK meta really favours certain factions over some of the big hitters found in North America. We had a grand total of 4 Soul-Blight Gravelord players and then 2 Kruleboars players, and then it's just one of everything else. So we had Beasts of Chaos, Bone Splitters, Chaos Legionnaires, Cities of Sigmar, Corvus Cabal, Dark Oath Savagers, Flesh Eater Courts, Fire Slayers, Gorja Morpak, Gloomspike Gits, Head Knights of Slanesh, Horns of Hashut, Hunters of Huanchi, Iron Golems, Iron Jaws, Stormcast Eternals, Sylvaneth, the Unmade, Wilderco Hunters, and the Questor Soulsworn. This is a pretty diverse list of factions, and it's very interesting to see what people have brought, and the results are very telling in terms of which factions did well in this pack and which didn't. The most popular faction here was Soulblight Gravelords, and they did pretty poorly across the board, mostly due to missions and Soulblight Gravelords being much more suited to standing on objectives and having really good value units. Now, Crewboys and Stormcast, if you include Questor, are up there as the second most represented, and yeah, these guys performed pretty darn well overall. All 4 are in the top 10 and 2 of them are in the top 3. In a kill pack like this, seeing Super Elite Stormcast do well makes sense. They cleave their way through lesser factions whilst having the bulk to stick around, in addition to rock solid action economy thanks to the Questo elements in both. Crewboys, on the other hand, both pushed allies very hard to maximize their kill potential. You've seen my list with the triple threat of Brute, Clawback and Bolt Boy, and this allowed me to carve a path through most things, whereas my fellow Crewboys player, Alex, chose to run double Beast Knobs from the Monster Killers, and they were brutally effective to boot. The rest of the pack mostly consisted of the yet-to-be fully proven Fire Slayers and a bunch of Bespokes. Seeing Corvus Cabal in any event is always awesome, but Unmade, Hunters of Huanshi and Dark Oath Savages in addition was awesome. What's more, most of these factions landed in the middle of the pack, with the Corvus Cabal in particular doing much better than I think most people will expect. Before we move on to notable omissions in the pack, Beasts of Chaos came in with double Dragon Ogres. Double Dragon Ogres! Now, I love Dragon Ogres for their models and their theme, but they are on the expensive side in terms of points. Seeing them here was awesome, and that's all I really have to say on that. Good on that lad for doubling down on his dream. Now, big notable omissions from the event have to be Ogres and Iron Jaws, kind of. We had 1 Iron Jaws player and 1 Gorjam Morpack player. In such an elite-centric event, Ogres could have potentially cleaned house due to their overwhelming damage output. Iron Jaws also love a good scrap, but interestingly, the only Iron Jaws player didn't do all that well once all was said and done. And of course, Caradon Overlords were also missing, to the happiness of everyone involved. Apparently, the UK just doesn't like them, and I am all for that. But let's look at the results, starting with my results. In the end, I went 3-1 and landed 8th, which I am very happy with. I made some glaring mistakes game 1, which was my first loss, namely misreading the mission and costing myself dearly as a result. With my wins, I landed 1 major victory and 2 minor victories and tabled 2 opponents, which was pretty darn funky. All my opponents were awesome though, and I would happily play any of them again without a second thought. I really want to bring up Game 3 and Brutal Conquest though. It's a fairly straightforward mission that has one terrifying ramification at the bottom that causes models to die if they are too close to a board edge. This is pretty spooky and can end games very quickly in the right situation. I have 2 nets. It's pretty easy to see what could have happened here if I really want to game the mission and dominate the game. What actually happened here was really feel bad, and I want to highlight it because even in events, no matter how competitive they are, I want people to walk away from my games having fun wherever possible. So what happened was we both knew this 4-inch rule existed. We both mentioned it during the first turn and the second turn, but we both forgot to measure for it with any great accuracy or urgency because we were just tied up in the emotion of the game. Now, my opponent realized his error at the bottom of turn 2. 3 of his 5 models hadn't moved far enough to survive the culling. They'd gotten distracted by a Gorger and some Gut Rippers. Now, I forgot to check it all, so I didn't even mention it. He knew at a glance that he'd fucked up, and instead of keeping quiet, he brought it up and he scooped. He conceded. He had 1 model left after the purge, and I just scored an entire warband's worth of points. Being honest, letting me know, and then conceding after immediately losing is beyond admirable. But this is not a great way to win either. So instead of taking the turn 2 win, the table and the major victory, I convinced him instead to continue playing. We put the models back on the board who had just been wiped out and pushed them half an inch forward to be out of culling range. He had the movement to do that anyway, he just didn't move them that extra half an inch. It was a tiny lapse in concentration that resulted in an instant loss. The game was 5 minutes long at most. Nobody is leaving that table feeling great. So we played, I still got the win, the game was tense, it was to the wire, and I like to think we pulled out a solid gaming experience instead of one soured by nonsense. There is a difference between playing competitively and playing sweaty. Sometimes you can't wind back that clock, and that's fine. But in this case, it was a simple, move the rest of your legal movement and don't instantly lose. And that, to me, is how people should play when this kind of thing is brought up. And then this brings up the question of net. Would I use a net or a pull effect to abuse this mechanic and get easy kills? Absolutely. Of course I would. But that's not the same as moving 3.5 inches instead of 4 and getting well and truly shafted. Anyway, Ben, if you are watching, you are an absolute legend, and I hope to clash with you again in February. Not only that, I would like to shout out to all my opponents from the event because they were all excellent. So Jack, Phil, Ben, and Finn, keep on being fecking awesome. So let's look at the overall results, and you can see that the top 10 are filled with combat-centric lists, where tricky or horde-focused lists tend to fall quite low on the overall tierings. For example, Soulblight capped out in the middle of the pack and bottomed out as well, so not a great showing overall for the Scally Boys in the grand scheme. I think 12th is the biggest shocker here because the Corvus Cabal were right on the heels of top 10, and the Corvus Cabal are widely considered pretty darn awful. And then if you look right at the bottom there, you can see Iron Jaws all the way down in 24th, which was a massive surprise. I didn't get a chance to check out their list, but Iron Jaws are a big part of the big three when it comes to Smash factions. So something went very wrong since they were outscored by Hunters of Huanchi, Dragon Ogre Beasts of Chaos, and Corvus Cabal, none of which are particularly suited to a kill pack. Let's have a look at the top 8 though, since that is roughly the top performing third of this event, and take a gander at what they brought to the table. Of course, I came 8th and we've already talked about me, so let's skip that entry and then work our way up. In 7th, we have Iron Golems ran by Josh, who gets the prestigious award of being the only first edition bespoke to breach the top 8. They brought a Dominar, Signifier, a Crusher, a Breacher, a Bolus Legionnaire, and a Drillmaster. This list is pretty darn tough since the combo of a Breacher and Crusher, both of which are strength 6 4-8 damage titans, hit ludicrously hard, and not much can stand up to them. I am not in the least bit surprised they did as well as they did. This list is super funky and super killy. In 6th, we have the Gorgia Morpack, forged by Eitan himself, but piloted by Charles. This list is disgusting and exactly how I would run a competitive Gorgias list. A Clawback, 2 Gorgias, Hrothgorn, Quiv, and Bushwhacker. You have speed for days, chaff for days, incredible ranged threat potential on Hrothgorn. This was a great list to run in a kill pack since everything is hitting like a ton of bricks, bar the Noblars who can help their Ogre buddy hit like a ton of bricks when they want to. All that being said though, due to the high toughness of the top tables, I can see the regular Gorgias and the Clawback really struggling to get through Stormcast, and I do believe his only loss was down to a Stormcast list, so I'm not just talking out of my arse for once. Probably. And in 5th place, it was Cities of Sigmar led by Matthew. These guys are super new to the meta, so it was awesome seeing them at the event and seeing them hit top 8 to boot. He took an Arc Knight with +4 wounds, a Sergeant at Arms with +4 wounds, a Cavalier, a Great Herald, a Battle Mage, an Executioner, a Blackguard, and 3 Steel Helms. What's really interesting here is that in an event that really liked elite warbands, Matthew hit 5th with a 10 model list. Now, I haven't played with or against the Calistite hosts, however, this list looks really cool. The Sergeant and the Steel Helms activate their amazing defensive reaction. The Sergeant can also pop an aura to catapult the toughness of this list to 6 or 7 per model, which is insane. And then throw in the banner, which gives this list a lot of movement play. There didn't seem to be all that much in terms of damage, but there are multiple ways that this list can bestow +1 attack, which certainly helps, and taking some of the Killia elves is a nice touch too. I'm also a massive fan of running one model with high movement and durability, and taking that Cavalier speaks to me on an emotional level. I would be very interested to know how that model fared, and if he managed to get value out of its movement 9, toughness 5, and 20 wounds. Fighting at the heels of the podium finish is Eitan, who did amazingly. So well, I thought his list was going to take the top spot at one point. He ran Wildecker Hunters, and yeah, his list was nasty. He had a Warden, 2 Dogs, 4 Trailblazers, Calthea Zandaya, and an Arbalista with +1 strength, which is a list I have faced before and I did not do too well against with my Flameseekers back in early testing. Eitan was a force of nature in his games, with his Arbalista being the menace of the event. He pulled off the dreaded Calthea Coordinated Strike, followed by Weight, followed by Coordinated Strike, followed by Action. This allowed his Arbalista and multiple other things to fire 4 times in a single turn, and I swear the entire hall could hear the wails of his vanquished foe as bolt after bolt skewered everything in sight. He did take a loss though, and that was in round 3, where a sneaky wizard managed to land an even sneakier crit and kill his Arbalist turn 4 and basically delete his tally. I spoke to Eitan after the event. I am pretty sure he has found a way to refine this list, and I think I know where the next iteration is going. No spoilers, but it sounds nasty. Look out for that making waves in February. And now we get to the top 3 with Tobias and his Horns Hover Shut. Tobias was an absolute corker of a lad who I talked to at the end of the event. He ran an Alpha with +1 movement, 2 Demolishers with Flame Hurlers, 5 Shatterers, and a Fomeroid Crusher with +1 attack. This list hits all the right notes. The Alpha, I assume, was used as a mobile brawler and Ash Bomb thrower. The Shatterers are some of the best chaff in the entire game. The stars of the show must have been the Flame Hurlers and the Crusher though. Flame Hurlers have the potential to devastate a board state with their triple, and just regular firing is really darn strong as well. 2 is just gravy. +1 attack on the Crusher gives this list a reliable Titan that can kill everything from chaff to other Titans with ease. A great list, well played. Congrats on 3rd, Tobias. In 2nd, we have Sam and his 1-box Questa Soulsworn. This to me was the biggest surprise of the event. Questa Soulsworn gets shat on in a lot of competitive discourse, so seeing them roll in 1-boxed with Questa Prime, a Knight Relictor, a Grand Hammer, a Double Swordsman, a Great Swordsman, and a Great Axe is just awesome. From what I understand of the games he had, these guys were able to use their outstanding action economy to dominate the battlefield. 3 actions everywhere on models that are all as tough and as strong as bespoke warband leaders. Plus, they have the very nice ranged attack from the Knight Relictor for some ranged threat projection. I didn't get to talk to Sam, but I did talk to some of his opponents, and he was very cool, very calm, very collected, and very, very skilled, with a poker face for days. Huge congrats on the silver, and I look forward to seeing what you do with the Questor going forward. And in 1st, we have the Stormcast Eternals with Questor Soulsworn allies, piloted by one of the nicest guys I have had the pleasure of meeting, Demetrius. He ran a Protector Prime, 3 Paladins with Star Soul Mace, an Errant Questor with Grand Spear, and a Soulsworn Knight Relictor. This list is beyond brutal. This has 6 models, all of which are 20 wounds and above, toughness 5 minimum, and they all hit like a brick. Half the warband is hitting at 3, 5, 4, 8, and the rest aren't that far behind. Throw in ranged projection, defensive buffs, and more action manipulation than you can shake a mace at, and you have a list that was seriously threatening on the battlefield. Even the slow-moving paladins can get around effortlessly. Once again, showing that the quest door have a lot of play it can help bolster an otherwise slow-moving brick of paladins. A well-earned gold with a sexy-looking warband that, amazingly, were partially painted on a train. A man of many, many talents. Roll on February. Overall, this event was awesome. Everyone I met was amazing. Of course, getting to meet Eitan from Off Meta Musings was a treat. A top bloke who I didn't get a chance to clash with, but maybe, just maybe, we'll roll some dice in February. And I met so many subscribers and people I met on the WARCRY Discord, and getting to just be absorbed in the hobby with like-minded people and just getting to know people and being constantly surprised when people approach to say hi was just amazing. I started this channel a year ago and I didn't expect any kind of success, and being able to go to an event and shake hands, take selfies, shit talk, and just talk was awesome. Despite facing a 3-hour drive home after the event, just chilling around Warhammer World and bantering for over an hour once everything was packed away was a true highlight. The stress of the event was over, the awards were handed out, and just chill vibes were left. It was awesome. Awesome stuff. Huge congratulations to Demetrius for taking the top spot, and a massive thanks to everyone who turned up to make this event what it was. We all know WARCRY isn't Games Workshop's most thought about game, so seeing so many people turn up and have a good time gives an old man some hope that the future for the hobby is bright indeed. Here are some glamour pics from the event too, so enjoy the wonderful paint jobs by some equally wonderful people. I hope to see everyone again in February. I hope to meet up with more people, in fact, and you never know. A sneaky trip to the States for a big event could be an interesting adventure. I'll just have to convince Mrs. Toast. And that's the end of the video. If you made it this far, you are an absolute legend. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. A huge thank you to everyone who signed up to my Patreon and my YouTube members. Their names are on screen now and they help fund future WARCRY excursions. Sign up to join them. A special shout out to all the algorithmic demon slayers: Armoire Enthusiast 7, Brioche, Demetrius Dagaius, Kitty Cowan Prakamakul, the Head Knight of Paint, and Long Run Hobbies. Until next time, lads, ladies, and everyone in between and beyond, ta-ra.